We're picking up with the chapter Strider, which is chapter 10. Frodo, Merry, Sam, Pippin, they're at the sign of the Prancing Pony. They've gone off to their room. Merry's outside. And Bartleman Butterbur tells Frodo he wants to have a short talk with him. He says, okay. Frodo's in his room. Strider is also there. And they start to talk. And Strider kind of lets out that he knows a little bit more about Frodo's business than Frodo is aware. He says, I can help you, I can give you counsel, I can give you guidance, I can protect you. Page 165. He tells them right in the middle of the page that the Black Riders are to be feared really more than anything else. They are terrible. You don't want to be caught by them. Okay? And he says at the bottom of the page, perhaps I know more about these pursuers than you do. You fear them, but you do not fear them enough. Tomorrow you'll have to escape if you can. Strider, he talks about himself in third person. Strider can take you by paths that are seldom trodden. Will you have him? Me. Okay? Sam looks at Frodo and says, with your leave, don't. Just tell him to go away. I don't trust him. What does Strider look like? Describe him. I don't mean facial features. How's he dressed? Louder. Dirty. He's like a bum. He's like a homeless person. His clothes are all stained and travel worn. He's probably maybe got still some smudges of dirt and stuff. Fingernails are not manicured, all that kind of. He's weather beaten. His face is lined with age. He's tan, leather-like. Okay? Sam, he says take care. I agree. Let's start with him. He comes out of the wild. I never heard no good of such folk. Put that in a modern context. What's Sam saying? He's a foreigner. He's not like us. He's not one of us. Well, contextually, Sam is a foreigner right now because Bree is not his home. He's in someone else's land, so to speak. Pippin looks uncomfortable. Sam kind of has brought up some things he shouldn't talk about. Okay? And Frodo's like, Sam, top of the next page, I disagree. I think I can trust him. I think you're not free really as you choose to look. What has Frodo just said about Strider's appearance? It's a disguise. Or, another way of putting it, there is more to you than what we see. There's something deeper inside. Okay? He says, but Sam's right. I shouldn't just take you up on your offer immediately. Okay? Bartleman Butterbur interrupts, apologizes profusely, and says, Gandalf left me a note, a letter for you. I was supposed to deliver when he left last time. Okay? Strider steps forward out of the shadows, and Bartleman Butterbur is surprised. He's like, what are you doing here? Okay? He doesn't trust him. I wouldn't take up with a ranger. Strider, then who would you take up with? A fat innkeeper who only remembers his own name because people shouted at him all day? They cannot stay in the pony forever. They cannot go home. What would you do, Bartleman? They can't stay here. They can't go home. Why? Why did Frodo leave the Shire? To protect it, to keep it the same. What should Frodo now realize about the Shire? Why does he say they can't go home? Who showed up at the gaffer's door the night they left? A Black Rider. The Shire's not safe. They can only go on. Okay? They keep talking. Frodo says, I can't tell you what my purposes are and such. It's a long tale, but if you want to help me, I'm in danger as long as I'm in your house. Excuse me. You will be in danger as long as I'm here. Frodo means I need to leave as quickly as possible. Not that moment. They got to get some sleep. He says these Black Riders, I'm not sure, but I think they come from, and Aragorn Strider cuts him off. They come from Mordor. From Mordor, Bartleman. You've heard that name, if that name means anything to you. Save us! Like, Jesus, Because what does Mordor mean? They come from hell, Bartleman. They come from hell. They're after him. He's staying in your little hotel. Hell's going to come knocking on your door. Okay? Buttermere says, I'm still willing to help you. Frodo reads the letter. Mid-Year's Day. Okay? Frodo didn't leave Mid-Year's Day. This letter was supposed to be delivered quickly after Mid-Year's Day, sometime in June. Frodo doesn't leave till after his birthday. September 22nd. July, August, 3 months later. He was supposed to leave immediately after getting this letter, probably sometime a little bit later in June. He says, if I don't come, Gandalf says at the end of the letter, make for Rivendell. Elrond will advise you. P.S. Do not use it again. How does Gandalf know Frodo used the ring? When he wrote the letter, Mid-Year's Day, possibly, or what might else he be saying? He had a very strong inclination that Frodo was going to use the ring, which he did, between that date and September 22nd, okay? Not even for any reason. Also, double postscript. Make sure it's the real Strider. Because he tells him, you could trust a friend of mine named Strider. His true name is Aragorn. And then he includes a poem. Okay? So they talked a little bit about the letter. And Strider says, at the end of a paragraph on page 170, at the very bottom, my looks are against me. Sentence before, I hoped you would take to me for my own sake. I hoped you would believe me just on the basis of me, but my looks are against me. Now, Sam kind of implied, or it was kind of suggested, by Frodo, there's more to you than meets the eye, like this is all a disguise that you put on. Strider makes it sound like, not really. What you see is what you get. This is why he shouldn't be handsome. Well, he shouldn't be drop dead gorgeous handsome. He could be good looking, but that good lookingness has been damaged by time. You could look at him and go, 5-10 years ago, man, he would have been. But age has taken its toll. Okay? Sam jumps up. You never mentioned Gandalf before. How do we know you're the real Strider? How do we know you're not just a play-acting spy? He says. What do you say to that? You're a stout fellow, Sam. In other words, good! Good, you're being a good protector. But here's my real answer. If I was a play-acting spy, and he stands up. He says, I could kill you now. I could have killed you already. If I was after the ring... Has anybody mentioned the ring? No. I could have it now. How tall is Strider compared to Sam, or Frodo, or Merry, or Pippin?
Like twice their size.
His real name, when Tolkien first started writing this, was Trotter. Because of the length of his... And Strider's not much better. Because of the length of his legs. He goes walking around, Bartleman Butterbird tells us, on these long shanks of his. So he's tall, probably 6'5", Okay? And walks everywhere. But I am the real Strider. I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and if by life or death I can save you, I will. What has he just done? He's pledged his life to Frodo, if by life or death. I can help you? No. I can save you. I will. Okay? There's silence. And Frodo says, you frightened me a lot tonight. But never in the way that the servants of the enemy would. Or so I imagine. I think one of his spies would seem fairer and feel fouler, if you understand. Seem. What kind of verb is seem? I used this example in my first class. Sorry if it bothers you, but it's the only one I can think of that really works. Kim Kardashian seems like a virtuous, wholesome woman. Not if you get on the internet, she doesn't. It indicates a condition contrary to fact. Okay? He says, I think, where'd it go? One of his spies would seem fairer, that is, the appearance. He wouldn't be dirty and foul and filthy like you are. He'd come across like a knight, so to speak, and feel fouler. That is, but there'd be something about him that just kind of like, can't put my finger on it. Notice Strider's response. I see. I look foul and feel fair. That is, I'm ugly on the outside, and yet Frodo what? He trusts him. There's something within that says good. Okay? And he quotes the lines. Frodo's like, I say Aragorn, those lines go with my name. That is, it's like those lines are tied together with the name. Okay? So, they keep talking, and Strider tells them where they will head for, what they will head for. He mentions Mount Weathertop. Sam asks what it is. He explains, used to be an outpost, used to be a fortress on this old mountain back in the old days. Okay? They talk about the Black Riders. Merry comes in. Merry mentions, the darkness that came. He was found in the middle of a road, middle of the street. So, what does Strider have them do? Because now that they know Black Riders are nearby, they don't stay in the rooms that they rented for the evening. Instead, they all stay in this one room. I think it's Strider's room. We find out in the morning, the rooms that they were in have been busted into overnight, and the bolsters put on the beds to represent little hobbits have all been stabbed and pitchforked. They don't get to leave at 4 o'clock in the morning when it's dark and just slip out quietly. Now there's like a big parade. The whole town of Bree comes out. So there's nothing hidden about their escape. Chapter 11, Knife in the Dark. Frodo has a dream. We're not going to talk about the dream. We might talk about it later because it is referred to later. And they make their way to Weathertop. Okay? 5 days later, they get there, and it's on the 6th day. They get to Weathertop. Let's see. And Merry asks, it's now the 5th of October. Merry asks, I wonder who made this path. I don't know that I like it. Is there a barrow on Weathertop? I mean, the last time they were on a mountain-like thing, there was a burial, a grave, okay? And he's immediately associating grave, Barrow-Wight. No Barrow-Wights, Aragorn says. Page 185. He talks about the men of the West. We have not heard hardly anything about the men of the West so far. And how they fought against the evil that came out of Angmar. He says, this path was made by the men to connect the forts. Okay? Nothing evil about this path. he says that Elendil, we don't know yet who Elendil is. We're going to find out more. Says Elendil stood on Weathertop, watching for the coming of Gil-galad out of the west in the days of the last alliance. Okay? I'm going to jump ahead and give you a little genealogy. Elendil is Aragorn's / Strider's long ago ancestor, grandfather. Way long ago. Gil-galad is an elf chieftain, elf king, if you want, that comes, remember the other day I had drawn over here, you've got the land of Beleriand, you've got the ocean that separates them, you have an isle called Westernessa here, and then you have Valinor, okay? Valinor is the land of the gods and elves. When the elves are first awakened, they leave this land, they go across the ocean, and they're welcomed into the land of the gods, all right? They're there for a long time until they do some bad stuff, and then they come back over here. Most of them, many of them. Some of them get to go back. Gil-galad comes from over here. Elendil is standing here on Weathertop, looking, hoping for the elves to return, and maybe some of the gods. The gods don't, by the way. Okay? So when he says, it is said that Elendil stood here looking for the west, it's almost like and I never thought of it literally until just now. I've been reading The Lord of the Rings since 1977. It never clicked. It's like he's going to sacred territory. My great. Why do people do genealogical research? They want to find a connection, okay? He's going to go stand where his granddaddy stood in the days of the last alliance, okay? They gaze at Strider. They're like, who the hell are you, dude? I mean, you sure know a lot. And then suddenly, they all hear this voice start chanting about Gil-galad was an elven king, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And it's Sam. Mary, don't stop. That's all I know. Bilbo taught him. All right? Sam, there's a whole lot more about going to Mordor, Pippin, going to Mordor. Hope it won't come to that. Aragorn, Strider, do not speak that name so loudly. It's a name. Why not speak the name? Harry Potter novels. He who must not be named. Everybody, nearly everybody, refers to Voldemort. He who must not be named. Who doesn't, and who tells Harry not to fear a name? Dumbledore, okay? Why does Aragorn say, don't speak the name so loudly? Who's in the area? Yeah, not like 20 feet or 20 yards away, but they're searching, and by saying the name, it's like sending a signal, a beacon. Okay? It's now midday. They climb up onto Weathertop. They find a hollow where they kind of set camp. They go up onto the top. It's flat. And they see burn marks. And Mary's like, I don't see any sign of Gandalf. Strider, I wonder. See, if he was a day or two behind us at Bree, he would have arrived here first. He can ride very swiftly, etc. And he picks up a stone on the top of the cairn. Anybody know what a cairn is? It's a stack of stones. It's something you leave for people who are following you or looking for you to indicate someone has been there. Why? Because stones don't just stack up naturally. My dad and brother and I, one time, one of our backpacking trips in Yosemite in the High Sierra, we were doing backcountry, so we were off trail. And we scrambled up over this one ridge, 8,000 feet or so, and there's this stack of granite stones. A pyramid, essentially. It's like, Well, somebody else has been here because they didn't get here on their own. So, on the top stone are some marks. Frodo sees these scratches. He goes, I don't know what it is. Aragorn, the marks on the left are a G rune with thin branches. It might be a sign left by Gandalf. The scratches are fine. He says, what could they mean? Asked Mary. G3. It's like battleship game, you know. G3. Okay, G, Gandalf. What does the 3 refer to? We've already been told the month, and a page or so ago we were told the day. October 5th. Aragorn / Strider interprets that to be Gandalf, October 3rd. He was here on October 3rd. Okay. 3 days ago, because this is now the next day after the previous one that it was sunrise, morning. This is now October 6th, all right? So, they start talking about Rivendell. Again, they're now up at the top of this flat mountain. The fortress has been beaten down. So they're up here, which means they can see far off in the distance there. What else does it mean? Anybody way out there looking at this mountain and see sky behind it, what have you just created? Perfect profile, so to speak. So anything that stands up is suddenly a shadow against the light sky. And we hear somebody speaking, can't remember, it's either Frodo or Sam. Look! Pointing downwards. At once, Strider flung himself on the ground behind the ruined circle, pulling Frodo down. What is it? Strider, I don't know, but I fear the worst. See, these aren't roads that people usually travel. It's dangerous in the wild. Okay, they creep up to the edge of the ring, and there's Black Riders. The enemy is here. There's no indication at all in the novel that the riders suddenly appear because Mordor is named twice. But I think it is. I think first when Pippin says it, or Mary says it, and then Sam, it's like that homing device, so to speak. Okay? So, they go back down into their little dell, they build a fire, and Mary, 191, says, tell us of Gil-galad. Do you know any more of that old lay? Strider says, yes, I do. But I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you something else. And he sings to them a portion, bottom of 191 through 193. He sings to them a portion of the lay of Luthien to Nuviel. Okay? Why is this significant? Why does Tolkien spend a page and a half? A couple of reasons. It's vitally tied up with the ring in the whole journey. Okay? It's also because Aragorn has a personal stake, so to speak, in some of the stuff that the story, the song relates to, and things now. Okay? Aragorn is descended. If I may be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Aragorn is also descended partially, he has an ancestor back there, to Beren and Luthien. Just as we're going to see when we get to the Council of Elrond, Elrond is directly related. Luthien is Elrond's mom, granddad, great-great-grandmother. Elrond is really, really, really old. Multiple thousands of years, all right? But there's another reason why this is important. Tolkien thought of himself as Beren, this hero. I don't mean he thinks he was heroic. He imagined himself as Beren and his wife as Luthien. Because in Tolkien's story that relates this, the tale of Beren and Luthien in the Silmarillion, this is a great love story. You have all these heroic deeds going on, but that's not important. The important thing is the love Beren has for Luthien and the things he will do to win her over, so to speak. When Tolkien's wife died, and she was buried in the cemetery, and I think it's Summertown, England, just outside Oxford, he had, because she was buried first, single stone with their names, he had above her name Luthien inscribed. And then when he died, his son, his executor, had Beren inscribed on it. Okay? So, Aragorn goes on, Strider goes on, and he talks about the tale, and he says it is like all tales of Middle-earth, fair, but it is also sad. There's a reason for that. All the tales of Middle-earth are sad, because when people, men, dwarves, hobbits, die in Middle-earth, that's it. There is no afterlife. No eternal reward, no eternal punishment. It just, that's it. That they know of. We add that qualifier. Okay? Elves can die, go off to Valinor, get rejuvenated, reincarnated, and go back to Middle-earth. Elves are tied to this world. So in Tolkien's cosmology again, and he mentions this, and this is brought up in some of the drafts of the fairy story essay. Not anything published, because I've looked at these. According to the Christian tradition, when the heavens and earth are remade or made new, that means they will be new heavens out there, new earth, the elves will not be there. Tolkien's cosmology, and dwarves, hobbits, men, they'll be renewed. They will be, quote unquote, redeemed, not elves, because they're tied to this. Okay? So the Black Riders come at night, and let me go back just one second. Top of 194. Top of 194, before the Riders come, Strider talks about Beren and Luthien and what Beren did and Luthien with him to enable them to be wed. Her father said, you, Beren, can't marry my daughter. You're just a man. Back up. Luthien is an elf, okay, from the old world that before they went over to the other world, to the God's world. Her father was an elf. One of the first elves wakened. So she's second generation, historically speaking, of the elves. Her mother was a goddess, we would call. Her mother was a supernatural being called a Maya when you refer to them singularly. We're going to meet a couple of Maiar, plural, within the course of the Lord of the Rings. So she's half elf, half god. And this common man, common ordinary man, why? Because all men, according to the elves, are common and ordinary, wants to marry her. Her father's about to kill him just for even thinking of it, right? But she loves him. She's fallen in love with Beren. He said, okay, you want to marry my daughter? Fine. You got to get a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth in Thangorodrim. Okay? Morgoth, the original source of evil. The original evil, not a subsidiary. Sauron is a subsidiary. This is the corporation of evil, and Sauron's like a little offshore count, so to speak. All right? Evil, evil, evil. You got to get a Silmaril, which is a gemstone, from his crown. So you got to march into hell, where Satan sits, and cut this little stone out of the crown he wears. What are the odds? They don't sound good, right? But Beren and Luthien achieve that goal. A lot of bad stuff. He loses his hand, dies, is brought back to life so they can live a while together. Okay? This is going to be really important later on. The Black Riders come. They attack. What does Frodo do? Puts the ring on. Why? He doesn't choose to. It's not like he thinks, if I put the ring on, I'll be invisible. They won't see me. I'll be able to go up behind each of them and stab them in the back. No, it's because there's the ring. He puts the ring on, and suddenly it's not quite like day again, but it's like twilight. And he can see those Black Riders clear as day, but he can't see Merry, Sam, Pippin, and Strider clearly. It's like they've disappeared. Which also means the Black Riders see him clear as day. And they probably see him with a glow on his hand, you know. They strike out at him, he strikes out at them. He throws himself on the ground, page 195, and he hears himself crying out, O Elbereth Gilthoniel, and he stabs at the feet of his enemy. There's a shriek, that is, whoever the enemy is, he gets him in the foot. Okay? And Frodo passes out. So, Frodo gets stabbed in the shoulder. Chapter 12. They wake up. Frodo wakes up. Merry, Sam, Pippin, Strider are there. Frodo dozes on and off. Strider goes and gets some plants to help him feel better and such. They make their way towards Rivendell. All right? They keep talking while they go. And they meet, they see trolls that, if you've read it, you read about in The Hobbit that Bilbo met ages and ages ago, 80-some years ago, 70-some years ago. And they go in there, they go in the hole and stuff, they come back out the cave. They keep going on this passage, this path, and then they hear like sleigh bells, harness bells. Merry or Pippin was like, the Black Riders. Frodo's, no, I don't think Black Riders wear harness bells to announce they're coming. Who rides in? Not in the film. Glorfindel shows up. Okay? An elf from Rivendell. Aragorn introduces them. Strider asks, is Gandalf back? He thinks Glorfindel's out there because because Gandalf has gotten to Rivendell and has started sending out lookouts. He says, no, not when I left. He says, Elrond heard news about you and heard some other news and sent people up. Okay? Glorfindel offers his horse to Frodo. Nope, not going to ride your horse. I'm fine with this one. Black Riders come. They realize they're coming up upon them. They put Frodo on Glorfindel's horse. He tells Frodo, ride, and Frodo won't. Why not? What does Frodo think he'll be doing to his friends? He'll be leaving them. Meaning, putting them in trouble. What does either Strider or Glorfindel explain? Frodo, if you leave us, we're fine. We're safe. They're going after you. We don't have the ring. You do. Oh, okay. What does Glorfindel do? Does he give Frodo a word of command, as Gandalf might put it? Nope. He speaks to the horse. And the horse. Okay? So, Frodo makes it to the ford of Bruinen. This is a spot where the Bruinen River, okay, is passable. You can get across without getting washed down. Frodo makes his way across. The Black Riders, so Frodo's heading, let's say, here's the river. Frodo's heading this direction. Here's the river. Black Riders are coming this direction and this direction. They're going to try to cut him off. He gets across and then turns around and faces them. While the leader of the Black Riders starts to wade across on the horse. Okay? It gets like halfway across. Frodo sits upright and brandishes his sword. Why does it say, this is the last page of the chapter, with a great effort, Frodo sat upright? He's wounded. He's sick. The blade has poison in it. So he forces himself upright, holds up his sword, which is a dagger, right? Came out of the Barrow-Waite's thing. And cries, go back to the land of Mordor, follow me no more. His voice sounded thin and shrill in his own ears. The riders halt, but the narrator says, Frodo had not the power of Bombadil. Now, I don't know if that means, if this had been Tom Bombadil, they would have been blasted away or something. Possible. Or, if this is like Tom Bombadil and the Barrow-Waite, okay, that. His enemies laugh at him. Come back to Mordor, we will take you. Go back. Notice he whispers. He doesn't cry. Cry meaning yell loudly. He whispers. He's losing strength. The ring. They start kind of chanting. By Elbereth and Luthien the Fair, says Frodo, you shall have neither the ring nor me. Now again, who is Elbereth? Queen of the gods over here in Valinor. So by her and her, what is Frodo essentially doing? He's issuing an oath, a vow. But it's also kind of, not literally, a prayer. Okay? You're not going to get the ring or me. And the leader, who's now halfway across, stands up in his stirrups. So he's no longer sitting on the horse. His feet are in the stirrups, and he's now standing. And he does this. That's not, hi, nice to meet you. Raises his hand, and two things happen. Frodo's sword that he's holding up shatters. In other words, and his tongue sticks to the roof of his mouth. He loses the power of speech. The elf horse reared and snorted, that is the horse Frodo was sitting on. The foremost of the black horses had almost set foot upon the shore. That is this shore, the other side. Not the captain who's in the middle. At that moment, the water down here starts to build up, takes on forms and shapes. And back here, as Frodo's passing out and falling off the horse, he sees little pricks of light and one big flame of light. And he passes out. We turn to book 2, and we have many meetings. First chapter, first book, a long expected party. Many meetings is like another word for a party. All these people that Frodo has gotten used to, he gets to see again. He wakes up and he says Gandalf, because there's Gandalf finally. Where's Sam? Off to get some rest. He's been here, won't leave your side. They talk a bit. Gandalf says, okay, I realize I'm not going to be able to stop you from asking questions, so, ask away. You knew of the Raiders. He goes, duh, Frodo. I told you about them. Okay. Talk about Glorfindel. Talks about Strider. Talks about Barliman Butterbur being a moron. Says don't badmouth Butterbur. A lot going on. skipping a couple pages, bottom of 222, top of 223. Frodo asks, is Rivendell safe? What's he thinking? Just like he did when he did not want to leave his friends. He thought, if I leave Strider, Merry, Sam, and Pippin, they will be in danger. He doesn't want them to be in danger. Why does he ask about Rivendell? I think Frodo is getting at, is Rivendell in danger if I'm here? He says, Gandalf says, it's safe now. The elves may fear him, but they will never again listen to him or serve him. He says, and here in Rivendell, there are powers that can hold off the Dark Lord for a while. Notice, for a while. Ultimately, if Sauron gains enough power, he will overrun all of the world. Okay? He says, they, the elves, do not fear the ring wraiths, for those who have dwelt in the blessed realm live at once in both worlds, and against both the seen and unseen they have great power. What? How can you live in both worlds, Valinor here, so to speak, and the world here? Valinor is no longer here. You can no longer. I've got to be careful how I put this because we're going to get something at the end of the book. An average, ordinary, everyday person can no longer just get on a boat and sail west and arrive in Valinor. The only way you can arrive in Valinor is if the gods allow you to. And that means maybe you get on a boat and you start to sail west, but you start sailing and then you do this. And you leave this world. Okay? Those who have dwelt in the blessed realm do so now, Gandalf says, in both simultaneously. So the elves, Elrond, lives both here in Rivendell and simultaneously he's in the other world. The elvish heaven, so to speak. Okay? As is Glorfindel. He says, you saw him for a moment as he is upon the other side. Well, what is he as upon the other side? To our eyes, he would be like a living, breathing, walking, talking flame. Something that if we saw here, this is the thing I mentioned about C.S. Lewis the other day in his sermon, The Weight of Glory. We would probably want to fall down and worship him as being a god. Okay? So, they keep talking. I'm going to skip a bunch. Pippin comes in, et cetera, et cetera. Frodo comes out of the room, and Pippin sees him. He says, hooray, make way for Frodo, the Lord of the Ring. And Gandalf said, Pippin, shut up. Don't say those things. Okay. He meets Glóin, somebody that Bilbo knew years and years and years and years and years ago, back in the Hobbit story. Meets a bunch of people that have come to Rivendell for some reason. We're going to skip a bunch. Go to Council of Elrond. Yeah, I can skip that other stuff. I'm trying to get you caught back up with my first class, which I don't think is going to happen. Council of Elrond, not at all like in the film. Similarly, Frodo's rescue, Frodo's getting to the Frodo Brennan, not at all like in the film. What do we see at the end of that first chapter? Chapter 1 in here. We see Elrond sitting, and we get a long description of what Elrond looks like, and Glorfindel looks like, and Arwen Evenstar looks like, and how Frodo sees her, he whom few mortals have ever seen. And when he gets ready to go to bed that night, he and Bilbo leave the hall, and they go off to their room, and Frodo turns around and looks, and he sees Elrond sitting there, and he sees Arwen next to him, and Aragorn standing next to her. And we get this description. He seemed to be clad in elven mail. This is page 238. It's the last page of that chapter. and a star shone on his breast. They speak together, and suddenly it seemed to Frodo, Arwen turned towards him, and the light of her eyes fell on him from afar and pierced his heart. He stood still, enchanted, while the sweet syllables of the elvish song, A Elbereth Gilthoniel, and Bilbo says, don't be singing stuff like that all night long. They don't sleep. Seemingly. Okay? Wait, I might need to, there's a passage I found today, the first time I'd noticed it in 50 years of reading this book, and 20 years of teaching it, but it's coming up. So, the Council of Elrond. They all go into this hall, and Frodo is introduced to, or has pointed out to him so that he can visually take note of a bunch of people. There's Glorfindel, obviously. There's a couple of elves, or there's an elf from the Grey Havens. There's Legolas from the north, Gimli, son of Gloin, etc. Boromir is going to be introduced very shortly on that page 240. Okay? So the first person to speak is Glóin, or Gloin if you want. Okay? And he says, a few years back, an emissary came from Sauron, and he wanted to know if anybody has found a little ring. It's just a trifle, just, like a Cracker Jack's ring kind of a thing. And if anybody knows about Baggins. Person has returned, I think has come a total of 3 times. We thought we should seek advice as to what to do. 242. Elrond says, you've done well to come. You will hear today all that you need in order to understand the purposes of the enemy. There is naught that you can do other than to resist with hope or without it. You have no power. There's nothing you can do other than resist. You can do that with hope or you can do it without it. What's his point? Ultimately, you will fail if you try to do this on your own. Okay? With hope or without it. I might have mentioned this to this class before. I mentioned my first class. 20 years or so ago, bookstore in Northern England, a used bookstore, was going through a bunch of boxes of stuff that had been donated to it. And it found at the bottom of one of these boxes a poster, like 12 by 18. And they thought, this is totally cool, because the poster came from World War II, during the Blitz, the bombing of Britain by the Germans. And the poster said, keep calm and carry on. But what does it mean? When all hell's breaking loose around you, keep calm, that is, don't go crazy, and what does carry on mean? Keep doing what you're doing, okay? He says that, essentially. You can do it with hope or not with hope. But you do not stand alone. What does he mean you do not stand alone? For those of you who are Tolkien nerds, if any of you are, if any of you can answer this, what's the relationship between elves and dwarves? Modern example, KKK, NAACP. They don't play together very well. They do. You want to talk racial hatred? This is racial hatred. Because whites and blacks aren't different races. We're the human race. Those are different appearances. Elves, dwarves, totally different. Elves were kind of designed by the gods. And the dwarves were designed by one god who wanted to make things on his own. Okay? Kind of got in trouble for it, but anyways, you don't stand alone. That is Elrond telling Gloin, we, I'm speaking for the elves, will stand with you. All that animosity, all that racial hatred, gone. Why? The enemy of my enemy is my friend mentality. He goes on. You will learn that your trouble is but part of the trouble of all the Western world. What shall we do with the ring? The least of rings, the trifle that Sauron fancies. That is the doom that we must deem. Doom there means judgment. Deem means decide. That is the purpose for which you are called hither. Called, I say. Though I have not called you, strangers from distant lands, you have come and are here met in this very nick of time, by chance, as it may seem. Earlier, when they were talking with Strider, I believe it was, where was it? The idea of fortune versus fate was introduced. Okay? And so I was raised in my first class, what's the difference between fortune and fate? Well, we're going to hear fortune used more than once. And fortune in here is always used as if there is a guiding principle behind it. And that's because of the Boethian influence. When I talked about Boethius, when Boethius is listening to the goddess philosophy, she instructs him, say this for a moment is the world. Down here on the world, in the world, according to philosophy, God has placed fortune, a goddess, and fortune kind of rules the lives of people down here. Above that is providence. Providence is kind of directing fortune. Those are totally opposite to, different than fate. Fate is just this blind, what is going to happen is going to happen. There is no control over it. There is no direction to it. It's just blind chance. Okay? So he says, in this very nick of time, by chance as it may seem. It seems to be chance. What is Elrond saying? There's no chance about this at all. This is exactly how everything is supposed to be, is what he's suggesting. It is not so. Believe rather that it is so ordered. That is, the world is constructed in such a way that these things must happen in this pattern. That we who sit here, none others, must now find counsel for the peril of the world. It is our job to determine this of the world. Okay? So, now things are going to be discussed that haven't been discussed openly ever before. He says we have to talk about the tale of the ring, and I'm going to speak first. Why? Because I know the most? Because I'm the smartest and wisest? Nope. It's because of those people who are there, he's the oldest. And he remembers when the ring was made. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years ago. Okay? So, he goes on. He talks about the ring. He talks about the elder days, the first age of man, the second age of man. They're now in the third age of man. He talks about when the ring was cut from Sauron's finger. Okay? Frodo, 243. He interrupts. What? You remember? Okay? Back up one paragraph. I remember well the splendor of their banners. It recalled to me the glory of the elder days and the hosts of Beleriand. So many great princes and captains were assembled. Beleriand, that was the land over here that no longer exists. That was when they first fought against Morgoth, the real embodiment, so to speak, like Satan. So, Frodo, pause. I thought that was a long time ago. It was. He says, my memory reaches back even to the elder days. Earendil was my sire, who was born in Gondolin. That's a man. Okay. Lost my place. Before its fall, my mother was Elwing, daughter of Dior, son of Luthien of Doriath. I have seen 3 ages in the west of the world. And Earendil, that's that name that Tolkien read, a word that Tolkien read in Old English verse that sparked a fire in his mind. 2 words, Eala Earendel, lo, the morning star. And he looked at it and thought, it'd be a cool name for a person. And he starts creating this myth. Within the Lord of the Rings, Arendelle is a star. Why? Because the person has been transformed into a god, so to speak. So, he talks about what happened. How the ring was taken from Sauron, how Isildur died partially, or how Isildur's father died when he fell on his sword. Accidentally, he didn't commit suicide. He fell on his sword was broken, etc. Boromir jumps up and says, Isildur's bane, etc. I want to talk about that, okay? And Isildur, according to Elrond, notice, Elrond remembers all this. And he kind of goes like, let me see, what was it he said? And then repeats, so to speak, verbatim. He says, I'll take the ring as weregild for my father and brother. Weregild. It's an Old English term. It means man price. It's what you had to pay if you accidentally killed someone. Depending upon their status in society, you might have to pay a hell of a lot, or it might be pennies if they were, Joe Slob who worked out in the fields. Okay? But he shouldn't have done that. He should have destroyed it. So, we're going to skip a bunch. Boromir intervenes again, interrupts, says, Gondor stood strong. There's still the blood of Westernessa running through us. We still are noble and brave and blah, blah, blah. So he explains why he is there. 2:46 and 47. He says, a dream, how does he put it? On the eve, paragraph that begins, in this evil hour, this is on page 246 in mine, middle of that paragraph, on the eve of the sudden assault, a dream came to my brother. That is Old English ideology. What I mean by that is, notice where the dream comes from. It doesn't come from within. The dream comes from without. There's a very famous Old English poem called The Dream of the Rood. It's about a guy who dreams about the cross of Christ. And he says, it came to him. He doesn't say, I dreamed, I being the agent. It dreamed me. It came to me. Where do dreams come from? Okay? Do they come from our subconscious like Freud and other psychologists think? Or do they come, like many other traditions say, from outside? So, he says what the dream was. Notice, first of all, the dream came to his brother many times. It says, oft. And then it came once to him. Why does it come many times to his brother, but only once to him? And the implication is, it comes many times to the brother, and then it comes once to Boromir. What might that suggest? Step out on a limb a little bit. What's the dream trying to do? Would somebody get up off their ass and do something? The dream wants action. Go to Imlandris, where the sword that was broken dwells. The brother gets the dream multiple times. The brother doesn't go. It comes to Boromir. And Boromir says, my brother, seeing how desperate was our need because of the attacks, was eager to heed the dream and seek for Imlandris. But since the way was full of doubt and danger, I took upon it myself. Showing us what? What does Boromir think about his brother? He's not capable, not strong enough, not brave enough. We're going to meet the brother later on. And we're going to find out all of those are untrue. The brother is capable of, is strong enough, is brave enough, and more importantly, was wise enough. Okay? So Boromir says, I did it. Why? What's he implying? What did he say earlier? I traveled 110 leagues through snow and wind and rain and fire and dark and heat and all of that's added on by me. And I did it alone, emphasizing his heroicness, this Anglo-Saxon warrior ethos. He's puffing up himself. Because in just a moment, Aragorn is going to say, and here's the sword that was broken, and he throws it on the table. Guess what? It's still broken. Boromir, who are you? And what Tolkien really means, he's too polite to say it. Who the hell are you? Why did you interrupt? Elrond comes to Aragorn's defense. He doesn't say, this is Strider. He's a ranger from the north. He says, this is Aragorn, son of Arathorn. And what else? He is descended through many fathers from Isildur, Elendil's son. The same Isildur and Elendil that Elrond was talking about. What does that make Aragorn? Who are Isildur and Elendil to Boromir? Long ago kings. What's Boromir's position in his society in Gondor?
He's the son of the
Yeah,
steward?
that. Son of the steward. What is a steward? We don't use the word steward very much. We put vice, V-I-C-E, in front of a word to indicate a steward. J.D. Vance is the vice president. What does that really mean? He's the steward if something happens to Trump. Trump gets shot, J.D. Vance is no longer steward. He becomes president. He names a new steward who takes a position. There have been stewards in charge of Gondor for thousands of years. Why? The king has not returned. Third volume, The Return of the King. Aragorn is the future king. Okay? So Aragorn says, hold on, in a few moments Aragorn's going to say this. So they keep talking about the ring, and Gandalf finally tells Frodo, pull out the ring. Show everybody. Frodo does. Elrond, behold Isildur's bane. Anybody know what bane means? It comes from the Old English banan, B-A-N-A-N. To kill, to destroy. This is the thing that killed Isildur. Why? Because he took it and he shouldn't have. And in a later skirmish against orcs, he's wearing it in the river. Gandalf told this story to Frodo earlier. And the ring slips off his finger, and now suddenly he's visible, and the orcs turn all their fire on him. Okay? So, we're told Boromir looks at it and his eyes glint. Now, 9 times out of 10 in The Lord of the Rings, when someone's eyes glint, that's evil. It means lust for that thing that they are glinting at. I can only think of one, maybe 2 instances where it's not. One of them was back at Bag End when Bilbo said something to Gandalf. Well, if you want my ring, why don't you just say so? And we're told Gandalf's eyes glinted. Why? Ooh, he was pissed. He was just really, really angry. This isn't that kind of glint. Okay? So, Boromir says, the halfling is then the doom of Minas Tirith come. What did the poem say? Then shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand. Where's Minas Tirith mentioned in the little poem? It's not. So Aragorn has to kind of teach Boromir how to read properly, how to interpret correctly. And he says, the words were not the doom of Minas Tirith, but doom and great deeds are indeed at hand. In other words, judgment is coming. For whom? for lots. It will be judgment for lots of people and places and things. So he goes on, talks about the sword that was broken, and says, now that you've seen it, what do you want? Do you want for the house of Elendil to return to the land of Gondor? Do you want Elendil's heirs to return? Meaning, do you want the king to come? What would that mean for Boromir? More specifically, what would it mean for his father?
He's out of power.
Yeah, he no longer gets to sit in the chair next to the big chair. The big chair meaning the throne. He doesn't get to sit in that chair. That chair's been empty. Thousands upon thousands of years. What is our world's parallel to the sword that was broken, by the way? A famous ancient sword, Excalibur, King Arthur's sword. Okay? The sword that was broken can only be wielded by the one for whom it was made, Aragorn. According to the myth of Excalibur, who's the only one who can wield it? Who is the only one who could pull it out of the stone? Arthur. Just imagine for a moment. I know we don't have time for this, but imagine someone's doing an archaeological dig somewhere in either Cornwall or Wales or southwestern Scotland. Those are the three possible areas for quote-unquote Camelot. Okay? And they discover this rusty old sword that beneath the rust is still preserved the surface. And it has an inscription, either in Latin letters or Germanic runes. And it says, we have swords that have things like this, Excalibur I am called, for Arthur was I made. Imagine a sword from the 400 to 500 AD, dated to that time period. With that wording was described on it, was discovered. That would be one of the hugest, most mind-blowing discoveries ever. Why? Because it would say the myth, or at least a big chunk of it, is true. Which would cause a lot of people go, then what other myths that are out there are true? Boromir, I wasn't sent here to beg something, to get a reward. But, if the sword that was broken could come back out of the shadows of the past. Popular Arthurian mythological consciousness says Arthur isn't dead. When Britain has its greatest need, when Britain is on its knees and about to be utterly destroyed, Arthur will return. And he will return with Excalibur and Merlin. Boromir's like, blank. If Arthur and Merlin could return, I wouldn't say no to that. Okay? Bilbo jumps up and recites his little poem about Aragorn. And then sits that down. And notice what Aragorn says, page 248, to Boromir. I forgive your doubt. Notice he's saying, you're doubtful of me. I forgive you. Why? I don't look like the carved figures of Elendil and Isildur in the halls of Denethor. Which tells us what about Aragorn? He's been in those halls. He knows what they look like. He doesn't have a photograph, they don't have photos. Well, when could he have been there? Boromir lives there. He doesn't ever remember meeting Aragorn, a.k.a. Strider. Why? Because probably when Aragorn was there before, Boromir had not yet been born. Boromir's probably early 20s. Okay? He says, I'm just the heir of Isildur and such. And he goes, and talking about travels, okay, so you came from Gondor to here, 110 leagues. Let me give you an idea, Boromir, of where I've been. turn to the map in the back of the book that shows Middle Earth, and where Aragorn has gone is off the margins to the west. Off the margins to the south. He says, I've gone to where the stars are different than they are here. Don't be telling me about where you've been. Okay? But then he talks about the north, because this is the farthest north Boromir has been. He says, this is where my heart is. And he talks about what the duty of the rangers is for the peoples of the north. 248. He says, Strider, bottom of the page, Strider I am to one fat man who lives within a day's march of foes that would freeze his heart, or lay his little town in ruin, if it were not guarded ceaselessly. He's talking about Barlam and Butterbur. If Barlam and Butterbur were to take a one-day journey out of Bree, and it was unprotected by the rangers, he would meet such terrors that would kill him. Not kill him physically. The terror would scare him to death. Yet we would not have it otherwise. If simple folk are free from care and fear, simple they will be, and we must be secret to keep them so. What does he mean by simple folk? Does he mean intellectually, IQs of 90, 80, 70? Nope. What does he mean? People who don't have an experience of the outside world. People whose only concerns are their fields, their homes, their lives. None of the big stuff, so to speak. Not what's going on in Europe, in the Middle East, in China, in Canada, in South America. Nope. People who just work their farms and they do their daily. And he says, if they must be simple, because they are free from care and fear, he says, then simple they will be. They will stay that way. And this is what always gets me, we must be secret to keep them so. We don't want them to know about us, and that the only reason they are free from care and fear is because of us. There are, I don't remember what the number is. It's like maybe a half dozen tribes of pre-modern people in the world today, primitive societies, so to speak, that are essentially hunter-gatherers. They are like people who have been brought to the world we live in today, but who live in a world that hasn't existed for 15,000 years. They have no interaction with the modern world at all. And that's because in the land masses that they are on, the local quote-unquote national authorities have said, we're going to essentially build a wall around them to keep them as they are. Why? Because these people do not have modern diseases. They don't have modern problems. They don't have interest rates. They don't have taxes. They live as they have lived for tens of thousands of years. Aragorn is saying, and we should keep it that way. We don't have anything they need. Okay? So, the world is changing again. And when he uses that language, it implies, like, in the first age of men, when the world was flat, and then it was changed. He doesn't mean it's changing. Now we're going to go from a round ball to a pyramid. He just means everything is in flux again. Everything's coming to a head. It's moving quickly. It's moving fastly. And human history kind of works that way. There are periods when everything can just kind of plods on along, and then a whole bunch of factors come to act together, and you get tremendous, tumultuous change. He's saying, we're in that period. Okay? They keep talking. So Bilbo tells his tale, how he came by the ring. Okay? Gandalf tells his tale after a moment. He reads the inscription on the ring. He pronounces the words in the language of Mordor, which Elrond is not happy about. Don't ever use that language here again, like they're all swear words. And Gandalf says, we hope we won't have to. Gandalf then gives his tale, which explains why he never went back and helped Frodo leave the Shire. He got captured by Saruman the White. Explains what happened with Saruman. Okay. Page 259, I got to go into this a little bit of detail. Gandalf refers to Saruman as, Saruman says, I am Saruman the Wise, top of 259. Saruman, ringmaker. In other words, I'm like those elves of old that made rings, and I'm like Sauron. I can make rings too. Saruman of many colors. And Gandalf says that when Saruman said that, he looked at his white robes and realized they aren't white. They're all the colors of the rainbow. And when he moves, they kind of shimmer. But they look white. I liked white better. It's a little bit of humor. It's supposed to be. Saruman, white. It serves as a beginning. White cloth may be dyed. The white page can be overwritten, and the white light can be broken. In which case, it's no longer white. Tolkien's essay on Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics, he rips apart the critics because the way they read Beowulf was by ripping it apart to try to figure out what it was. They took that, what Tolkien says in the fairy story essay, that cauldron, that stew or soup of story, and they broke it all out, like I demonstrated that one day, into its ingredients and said, that's what it is. But you no longer have the soup or stew. You no longer have the story when you take it entirely apart. He that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. If you've left the path of wisdom, what word is there to describe you? You could throw in another one that modifies it. You're a damn fool. Okay? He's telling Saruman, you're a fool. Fine, you're not going to give up the information. Saruman has one other tact, T-A-C-T, that he's going to try to use to get Gandalf to work with them. Listen, Gandalf, my old friend and helper. What does he offer him? You know where the One Ring is. Let's use it together. Together, we can create a wonderful world where everything's great. Why does Gandalf not accept that offer? What's the problem with that? I could walk around to everybody in this room and go, try to fit your finger in that ring. That is, with my finger in it. It can only be worn by one person at a time. So, Gandalf gets it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Saruman gets it Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and they put it in a safe on Sunday. Not going to work. He says there's a new power arising. That's one option. There's a new power rising, Sauron. He says we can join our powers to his. It would be wise, Gandalf. Its victory is at hand. He's going to win. And there will be rich reward for its friends and those who aided it. He says, and maybe, as this power grows, we can, because we're strong and wise, over time, direct that power's energies to good ends. What does he think of as good ends? Approving the high and ultimate purpose, bottom of 259, knowledge, rule, order. All the things we have striven in vain to accomplish. He says, I've heard speeches of this kind before. Okay? What is Saruman, getting at? This is an idea that our country practiced for many, many, many years. Mid-1980s, I think it was, through 2000. Every year, Congress had to pass a law, a bill. So House of Representatives, Senate, President had to sign it. Granting MFN to certain countries. MFN stands for Most Favored Nation. Trading status. This was not for countries like Great Britain. Why? Because they already had an open, free, with tariffs and taxes and all that kind of stuff. Free trade has never been free. Treaty. This was meant for countries that we were not on a good diplomatic footing with. The number one nation that needed this and that we granted to was China. Why? You got 1 billion people. Of those billion, 750 million have spending power. We want them to buy our stuff. Tables are turned now. Okay? So every year this had to go up, and every year it was a dogfight. Why? Because you had this group for it, this group against it. Here are the two arguments. The arguments for and the arguments against. The arguments for most favored nation trading status were Saruman's arguments to Gandalf. If we open up trade and we send trade emissaries and we send CEOs of companies and such, and we get them to buy our goods and they sell their goods to us, maybe after a while we will be able to get them to act more democratically and to show human rights, blah, 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 blah. It never happened. In 2000, at the United States' insistence and agreement, China became part of the World Trade Organization. We no longer have to do most favored nation trading status. I don't know if you know anything about China human rights. They still today, some places, will take dissidents, people who speak out against the government, and I'm not joking, I'm deadly serious, pave people into roads. So you get concrete poured, or the one example I'm specifically thinking of, asphalt. Hot asphalt poured, and then you have to have a big old steamroller go and roll over it. Asphalt poured, people drugged, put on the ground so they can't move it, pave them into the asphalt. The stuff they're doing today, literally with the group of Muslim believers called the Uyghurs, they're also a racial identity. It's horrendous. Okay? None of this has worked, in other words. So Gandalf says, no, not going to do that. The argument against that, the argument Gandalf is, what? No. The argument against most favored nation was, we're not going to get them to be all nice. It's not going to work. Okay? So, Gandalf gets locked up, gets rescued by Gwaihir the Windlord. Skipping a bunch. I know we've only got 4 minutes left. Page 265. Didn't get to where I wanted to. Tom Bombadil gets mentioned. What do they discuss about Tom Bombadil? One guy, Aristor, I think, says, we should have invited him here. You should have sent an invitation, Elrond. Why would that be a problem? Well, Gandalf says he wouldn't have come. Why else? Did Elrond invite any of these other people? They came on their own. Something spoke to them. Okay? What else? They say, we can send the ring to him. Let him keep it. I mean, it has no power over him. And Gandalf says, yeah, but he'll forget about it. He's Tom Bombadil. He'll be out there singing, dancing, tiptoeing through the tulips, so to speak, in the forest, doing things like this with the ring, and he'll lose it. It won't be destroyed. What other options do they discuss for destroying the ring? Throw it in the ocean. Go to the Marianas Trench off of the coast of Asia. Drop it. 25, 30,000 feet down. Can't do that. Why? Just as the world changed back then, oceans, seabeds rise, floors fall. It'll eventually be discovered. What else can they do? Let's send it to the gods. They're going to put a sign, return to sender, and send it back. Not their problem. Elrond says it has to be destroyed. 267. To walk into peril, to Mordor, we must send the ring to the fire. Boromir, no! Let me use it. Elrond, we can't use it. Anything touched by the ring, anything done with the ring will ultimately become evil. Back to Saruman for a second. Saruman is saying, if we ally ourselves with Sauron, and this is Boromir's kind of idea, he doesn't state it, we can do good with the ring. We can take the means, the ring, the means of power, to do good things. That is, the ends, the good things we want to achieve, can be performed how? With an evil means, an evil power. Elrond says it can't. Whatever good we think we will create won't be good. Okay? What time is it? 11:04. We'll stop there. We're going to pick up on page 269, and we're going to finish I want you to get through, let me put it this way, for Thursday, have read through chapter 5 of Two Towers. Okay, that's the second volume, that's book 3. There is a quiz up over the second half of Fellowship of the Ring, book 2, that is due Friday evening at midnight, I believe it is. We will definitely finish the second half of this, and I'm planning, because I'll skip some stuff, more than I have been. And I hope to get through maybe the first couple chapters of book 3 or Two Towers. All right, sorry for getting bogged down in here. Have a good day. See you on Thursday.